and the speed at which we're moving. One of the things that Mr. Genho was going to be talking about is the amount of genotypes that we have already collected and how fast we're moving toward building genomic enhanced DPDs. That's been a long-term goal. The Breed Improvement Committee and the Beef Foundation, and we're on the cusp of actually getting that done. Those of you that were here yesterday got to see Dr. Genho's presentation on the registration program that he's working on for us, and in addition to that, he will be doing our genetic evaluations. This is a totally fascinating field. It's taking the entire beef industry into the future, and this is one of those technologies that just every discovery opens up another window, which takes us to another place. And the implications of this technology are just amazing in terms of the beef industry and breed improvement. Without any further ado, this is Dr. John Genho, Livestock Genetic Services, and he's going to be coaching us through what to expect, with genomics.
All right, hello? Can everybody hear me? All right. So hopefully we can not have any feedback here. All right, like Bill said, I'm John Genho. I'm glad to be here with you today. Just as a way of introduction, I'm a geneticist by training. I studied under John Pollock, Dick Foss at Cornell. That's sort of where I became an animal breeder, I guess. But I've always been involved with raising beef cattle. Still involved with about 1,000 head cow-calf operation in Virginia. So raising cattle is my real interest. This is just kind of a technical aspect of it that I enjoy participating in. So I want to just walk through a few slides here, and feel free to interrupt me as we go through this with any questions. I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. Just as a very basic, start, what are EPDs? I think a lot of you probably know, just to make sure everybody does, are expected progeny differences. And the idea behind an EPD is that it's a statistical prediction of how an animal's progeny will perform differently than the breed average. And so it's not a measurement on that animal. It's supposed to be how their progeny will perform. That's the concept. And EPDs are always relative to some base. And those bases are different for different breeds. So it's a deviation from the breed average is the way to think about an EPD. And each EPD has an associated accuracy prediction. And so if you just in a very simple visual model, if you think about it, this is what EPDs are really. You as breeders have pedigrees that you're collecting, measuring, hopefully taking care of, and making sure are correct and all those types of things. You gather some performance data, and so you take weights or measurements or whatever you do. I take that as the geneticist and I put it into my black box, and the result of the black box is the EPDs. That's what comes out the other side. Now the process that I go through is called bluff, and this is bluff. So if anybody can hurry and write that down, we'll go over it later. It's a statistical process. That's really all we have to say. It's a statistical prediction. There's no opinion, nothing like that. It's a number crunching statistical process that we go through CPDs. And the result really is this what I call a prediction of genetic merit. And so I'm trying to predict what an animal's genetic merit is through this statistical process. And so just to go over your data right now, you have about 1.2 million, 1.3 million animals in your database. And so it's a pretty decent sized database. We have about 200,000 birth weight records. There's about 335,000 weaning weight records, about 85,000 yearling weight records, and about 18,000 scan records. And that's actually 1,800. I got a zero plus there. So so you have a decent amount of data when it comes to birth weight, weaning weights, yearling weights. We don't have a lot of data when it comes to scan data, and don't have a lot of data when it comes to carcass data. You've done a good job of collecting weaning weights. We could use more yearling weights, which I think is always the problem, but you have a decent amount of growth data to kind of have a foundation to your EPDs. And right now you have a nice size pedigree with this performance data, and I think you have a good EPD system in place. Just to go over briefly what an accuracy is, let's say we have two different bulls. I have sire A that has a 40% accuracy, and sire B that has 80% accuracy, but both of them have an EPD of 30 for, let's say, weaning weight. The calves of sire A, I would expect to fall around this curve. Or sire B, I would expect to fall around this curve. The calves of sire A, I expect to fall around this curve. As you build accuracy, as a geneticist, I can be more sure of the prediction that I'm making. And accuracy comes through more data collection. That's the bottom line. And so sire A has a possible change value of 23 pounds. I'm saying he's a 30-pound weaning weight EPD bull, but that's plus or minus 23. Sire B, I'm saying he's a 30-pound weaning weight bull, but that's plus or minus 8.5. And so I think we can all see we'd rather be in the 80% accuracy category. And again, that comes with data collection. That's what drives that. So a few years ago, we had genomic tests come on the scene. And all of a sudden, you could pull a tail hair or blood sample or whatever it was you wanted to pull, and send it to a lab, and we got a genomic result back. And I think initially there was a lot of excitement, and from a lot of people saying, there's this whole complicated structure over here that these animal breeders are doing, and there's a black box, and there's big statistical formulas, and we're not sure about all that. We'd rather just send the sample into the lab, and they can tell us what the truth is. And so there was this argument that, well, genomics is the true genetic merit of an animal. We're looking at their genes, so that's true genetic merit. This other stuff is kind of these statistical predictions with these accuracies, and we're not sure about that. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to show you what a genotype looks like. This is what actually gets spit out of you pull a tail hair, you send it to the lab, and it gets spit out of a big genotyping machine. This is what it looks like right here. And so if anybody in the room can tell me an animal's true genetic merit, from that right there, I have a job for you. I think we're going to make a lot of money doing this. This is more data to analyze. That's what it comes down to. So what we realized pretty quick is that we had two parallel systems. We had our traditional EPD system that you guys have done a really good job of developing, building, and implementing. And then over here you had genotypes flowing into kind of a secondary black box, where there was we were trying to take this and make sense of it. And so this black box was trying to analyze that, and we were getting a second prediction of genetic merit. And the confusing thing is when a breeder sits there and sends a sample into the lab, and they send performance data into the breed association, and those predictions of genetic merit don't line up. Then you start to say, okay, who's right? They're both wrong. Or how does this work? And so this creates a situation where there's two competing pieces of information, and you as a breeder aren't able to get the two of them together. And I think we've all realized that this probably isn't a good model. I don't think anybody thinks this is a good model today. Somehow we have to get both of those predictions together in one place. The other issue becomes what's inside that black box. This one over here, I have a book about this thick that's put out by BF every few years. There's the BIF guidelines. And there's research and there's articles written and all those types of things to say exactly how I should calculate EPDs. This one over here, things sometimes get a little bit fast and loose. That's a good term. So this became a difficult situation. So a lot of people say, well, we've got a simple solution for it. We'll just take the MBVs and we'll dump them into the genetic black box, and that'll so everything will work out just fine. I love this quote. For those of you who can't read it, I'll read it. For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. And I think that's the truth. When there's a complex problem, you say, well, there's a really easy answer to this. Typically, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find out that's wrong. The best thing that we can do is try to figure out how to get those genotypes into our EPD calculations. And so this is where there's been a lot of research, a lot of emphasis over the past 5 to 10 years is not having a competing channel of information for you as breeders, but figuring out how to get those genotypes and put them into your existing EPDs. And so, just as to get into the weeds a little bit here, and if I've looked through this too quick and it doesn't make sense, it's not a big deal, but just to dig into the weeds a little bit. If you think about what a pedigree does for me when I'm actually calculating EPDs, what a pedigree does is it helps me to guess at how animals share genes in common. And so I can say that if two animals are half siblings, I might say they have a 25% relationship. So I'm expecting that on average they're 25% related versus animals that aren't half siblings. And so it's trying to help me get to this idea of genetic relationships. If we think about it, genotypes can help us explain genetic relationships as well. So just as an example, if I have this pedigree, if I have a sire with two offspring, so these two are half siblings, I know that this sire has a 50% relationship to this bull. Half of the genes from that sire went to his son. And so I know that they have half of their genes in common. If I look at bull 1's half sibling, bull 2, I guess that they have a 25% relationship. Because I guess that at random chance, their sire passed on some genes here and some genes here, and that some of those were in common. The truth is they could have a 0% relationship, or they could have a 50% relationship. They could have got the exact same half from dad, or dad could have given this one these genes and this one these genes, and they could be completely unrelated to that sire. So I have four brothers, and I always tell people that I'm more related to some of them than others. And I think that's true. If you watch kids, some are more like others than others. And this is what it is. It's Mendelian segregation. That's what it is. Every single generation, we separate genes out and pass things on at random chance. And so what genomics does is it comes in and says, well, rather than assume that this bull is 25% related, what I can do is I can look at a DNA sample on those two, and I can say, no, they're not 25% related, they're actually 21%, or they're 32% related. And so genomics helps me to firm up the pedigree relationships that you guys have been working on, making track of your pedigrees. And so when we think about it that way, this is what we end up with. We gather performance data, we gather pedigree data, we gather genotypes. The pedigree and the genotypes work together to help us come up with a relationship between animals. We now just put a G in front of our equation to make a G bluff instead of bluff, which is just a technical thing. And then instead of EPDs, we have genomic enhanced EPDs. And this is the best prediction of genetic merit that I as a geneticist can make for you given the data that you collected. So this is the model that we'll be implementing in the BBU genetic evaluation. Right now we have, and I actually have to commend everybody here, we started in the spring with, I think at NCBA in San Antonio. I talked to the performance committee, and we had just a few genotypes, and they said, let's get going, let's do this. And today you have over 400 high-density genotypes. That's as rapid an uptake as I've seen in any association. So you guys have really driven the genotype collection, and at this point, you have enough data to have genomic enhanced EPDs. And so our next EPD release, we're planning on doing by February 1st. Hopefully we get it sooner. But our next EPD release will have genotypes included, and BBU will have genomically enhanced in other breeds and compare that to our genotypes and maybe get a head start on what the genomics are worth. And I get really uneasy whenever we start to talk about that. Years ago, everybody thought, hey, if we figure out what the gene does in Angus and Holstein, then we'll be able to take it to the rest of the world, and anything that's Bos Indicus, Bos Pars, or anything in between, it will work perfectly. And we realize that that's not the case. If something works in Angus, it doesn't necessarily mean it will work in Beefmasters. And so this model relies 100% on your own data, on BBU data. It doesn't rely on data from any other breed association. And it's not associated with any other data from any other breed association. And so the important point there is if you say, well, you know what, we're in a new world, and I just have to turn in genotypes, and I don't have to turn in any more performance data, your EPDs are going to be terrible. They're still based on performance data, and if anything, we need more and more and more performance data, not less. And so sometimes those signals can get mixed up, and the incentives aren't quite right, but we need you to keep on collecting performance data to make this happen. The only other thing I wanted to mention before we go on is if you do want if you have animals you want included in the genomic EPDs on the next run, we really need samples to the lab by December 1st to make that happen. So if you have animals, you've been holding off and meaning to send in the samples and you need to get involved, November's going to be the month to do it, otherwise it's going to be too late. It'll be a few months later before you can be there. So I wanted to put this up because the question always comes up is, does this really work? It's all great when you put equations up, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really work. And I'll try to explain this. What this is, last summer we had a group of bulls that were coming off the test. And the guys that were pulling them off the test said, we want to see if your EPDs really are working. Second, if your genomic EPDs are really working. So they said, why don't you run the EPDs for us 2 ways before we ultrasound the bulls? Actually, they had ultrasounded them, but they didn't show me the data. They said, run them 2 ways before we give you the data. Number 1, run them without genomics. Run the EPDs without genomics. And number 2, run them with genomics. And then we're going to compare your predictions to how our bulls actually scan. And we're going to see if you really can help predict performance. Because that's what we're really trying to do. If we can't do that, it doesn't really matter what the numbers are. And so I ran the EPDs without genomics, and that's the blue dot. I ran them with genomics, and that's the red dot. And then we, on the x-axis here, we have the EPDs run. On the y-axis, we have the actual scan IMF performance data. And you can see that without the genomics, we had a 22% correlation between what I said the bulls would do and what they actually did. So from a statistical point of view, I think it's actually pretty decent. If I can predict every single time a 22% correlation, then we can make progress, we can move forward. These are yearling bulls, these aren't bulls with really, really high accuracies. So, but the great news is when I ran these with genomics, interesting, if you look at these are bulls with the highest scan records. And if you look at this bull right here, he had an IMF of 6. The EPDs were saying that he should be just above average without the genomics. When I put genomics in, it pushed him to the right. So that pushed him the right direction. The genomics said, no, he should be better than average. He should be further to the right. So I got that one right. I got this one wrong. If you look down here, this bull scanned at a 2.5 or 2.6. And without the EPDs, I was saying he's right about average. Or without the genomics, I was saying he's right about average with the EPDs. When I put genomics in, I said, no, he's far, far below average. And so you can see where we really helped is in these extremes. And it was the extreme bad where I really was able to pick them up. The bulls that I was saying would be right about average, and then came in really, really bad, the genomics pulled them down. And before we scanned them, said, no, they're not going to scan very well. So I think, here's another quote that I love. That's all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's the thing we have to keep in mind always, is your EPD model's wrong, genomic EPD models are wrong. They're taking reality and they're oversimplifying what's out there in reality. just to throw a little more information up and make one more point on the genomic EPDs. This is not your data. This is another association's data. But if you look at the non-genomic EPDs plotted against the genomic EPDs, one important point that we always have to keep in mind is that if I collect the genotype on my bull and send it in, I'm not guaranteed that that bull's EPD will go up. I'm also not guaranteed that it will go down. In fact, I hope, on average, his EPD stays exactly the same. I don't want his EPD to always be better or always be worse. I want them on average to be the same. I want them to spread around the average a little bit. Some of them are going to be better, some of them are going to be worse, but I don't want them to always go up or down. That would be a negative thing. This is what I want to see. I want to see the accuracy always go up. So if you collect DNA on a bull and send it into the lab and you include it in the genomic EPDs, on average, his EPD will be the same, but on average, but for sure, his accuracy will go up. And he will have higher accuracy. And so this is non-genomic accuracies on the x-axis and genomic accuracies here. And so the idea here is if you have a bull that already has a 40% accuracy without the genomic sample, you send the genomic sample in, he's going to jump from 40% up to about 50%. If you have a bull that has a 20% accuracy without genomics, and you send the sample in, he's going to jump from 20% up to about 40%. So you get your biggest benefit from DNA on those young bulls or young heifers. It's younger animals that you get the biggest benefit in collecting the DNA sample on. The older bulls, basically, if they're already proven, their accuracy is not going to change a lot. It's going to stay basically where it was. And I almost hesitate to say that because the bulls that are up here, they're very, very, very accurate. We need DNA samples on them because they're what's helping to predict the EPDs for the young bulls. So we need DNA samples on them, but if you have an 80% accuracy or 50% accuracy bull, and you send a DNA sample and don't expect you're going to jump to 95, that's not going to happen. And that's just walking back to the accuracy thing, again, the idea with accuracy is typing in my prediction, what I think we should, where I think the animals will actually land. So I just wanted to go through a few things that you as breeders can do to improve your EPDs. I think your EPDs, based on all the data that I've seen that you have, everything I've looked at, I think they're a good set of EPDs. I don't think they're something bad. I think it's a good tool for you. But if you ask, what can I do to improve them? The very first thing, the most important thing, is to continue to collect performance data. If you have performance data that hasn't been turned in, get that into the system. Your EPDs are only as good as the performance data that you put in. And genomics is not going to change that. It's not going to make that go away. Number two is contemporary group animals correctly. We're dealing with this group, we're running EPDs, and there was a breeder that all of a sudden had a couple wolves shoot to the top of the yearling weight EPDs. I mean, really to the top. And we started to look into it, and we talked to them and said, what's going on with these bulls? You know, they really look phenomenal. And they said, yeah, we pulled them out of the pen and halter broke them for the show, and so we had them over in the barn. We were bucket feeding them, and they were getting all the special treatment for pretty much the whole weaning to yearling kind of time frame. And we said, well, you put them in a different contemporary group, and they said, no, we don't worry about that stuff. Well, of course they're the best animal in that group. If they're not in the group, if they're in another pen getting special treatment. So the phenotypes, or the performance records, really depend on you as breeders letting us know when that type of stuff is happening. Putting your contemporary groups in correctly is really an important part to turn in that performance data. And if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk to you, and I know all the BDU staff would be happy to talk to you about contemporary groups. But that's an incredibly important aspect of turning in performance data. The other thing is that whole herd reporting programs are, I think, an incredibly important tool when you start to look at fertility and cow productivity. If you want a birth weight, you already have birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight. You already have those getting that data turned in, but I think that's fairly straightforward. The big opportunity that's out there, I believe, for the Beefmaster breed is cow productivity, fertility, those types of traits. It's maternal types of traits. The only way that we can arrive at those traits is if you participate in some type of whole herd reporting program. We need to know what cows, you just tell us the cows that perform really well. You don't tell us what cows don't perform. We don't have any way to say what the variation is. And so we really need some type of whole herd reporting program. So I encourage that as much as I can. And the fourth thing I put on the list is genotype animals. I tell you that if you came to me and said, listen, I can either collect a phenotype, or I can either collect a performance record, I can weigh them, scan them, I can be in the whole herd reporting program, I can either do that, or I can collect a genotype, I would tell you, participate in the performance record programs first. That's the most important thing you can do. The genotypes are secondary, or going to add to the performance data that you're already collecting. Genotypes aren't a way to not have to collect that data, it's a way to utilize it better. And that's my presentation. I'll take any questions.
Hello, John.
Hello.
We're a small breeder, and we do AI, embryo transfer, natural service, and being small, it's very difficult to come up with a valid contemporary group. In fact, we never really qualify to create one. But we're doing whole herd reporting. Is that data being lost because we don't have a contemporary group? It's still valid data but we just can't compare within our group.
Yeah, so the question is if you have a smaller herd and you're collecting the data but you're not able to have a very large contemporary group, is that data being lost or is it valid? A contemporary group of one has absolutely no variation, and it's completely useless. Contemporary group of 2 is better. Contemporary group of 100 is much better.
Yeah.
Any contemporary group over 1 is valid information, and every single additional animal you can add is more beneficial.
But I think we're required to have a certain number of animals in order to turn in, declare a contemporary group, if I recall. But
no, I'm not familiar with that. I might ask.
Okay.
I could ask. I don't know if Colin, you know the answer to that or not.
Sorry, say that one more time, right?
So does he have to have a certain number of animals to call it a contemporary group?
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So if you have weights on 2 animals,
It's still valid. It's still useful information.
we're going to use that in UPDs. Yeah. The only useless information is a contemporary group of 1.
Second question. Today we have a lot of published EPDs. We have, and very often we have, an example that's the sire summary. Now that you believe that with these 400 samples we're going to be able to start reporting genetically enhanced EPDs, where will we start to see that in the data that gets published? I assume it'll drive the accuracies up, but will we know that it was a genetically enhanced EPD involved in that calculation?
That's a good question. So the question is, how are you going to know that an animal had a genomic enhanced EPD or a genomic test that was used in calculating their EPDs? And
John, the strategy moving forward to identify those animals that do have genomic enhanced EPD, we've designed a logo, BBU GEPD logo that will be attached, to those animals, and so that will be the designator.
On their certificate and in the herd sire summary and
And then, like when you go to the website,
yeah,
print
okay.
that information on. So that's the strategy.
What if you have a bull that you've got genotype on, but all your cows aren't genotype? How will that show up as a number, or will it affect the accuracies of the offspring out of that pairing, or what? How will that?
so the question is, if I have a bull that's genotyped and he has a bunch of daughters or sons, and you have all your cows not genotyped, is his genotype going to impact the offspring? On the EPD, it definitely will impact the offspring. When you pull the Cyrus genotype, it'll impact the EPDs of all of his offspring and the cows he's bred to actually indirectly.
So you'd have a bigger impact though with both of them.
Now, where you won't see, and this is just the way it's set up, you won't see any jump in his offspring's accuracies because he was genotyped. We don't have that built in right now. We have it built in so that his accuracies will go up, but we don't include that jump in accuracy in his offspring. And calculating accuracies is pretty, not going into all the details, it's tough statistically. And genomics introduces a whole other level, and trying to take a genomic test and apply it on the accuracies to the offspring is very, very difficult. So we're not doing that. Rather than get it wrong, we decided we just wouldn't do it.
When you showed your graph a while ago showing the EPD and then how it missed on that one animal where you had the 6% IMF. So when making breeding decisions, if you look at an animal that has an EPD for IMF and it's low, yet his actual data is high, which of those is the most relevant for us as a breeder to make a selection?
That's a good question. So if you're comparing EPDs to actual performance data, if you have an EPD that's low and you have an actual record that's high, which of them is more relevant? You know, ultimately, a performance record is useless without a contemporary group average. If I have a calf that weaned at 550 pounds and he was in a group that weaned at 400 pounds, I'd say that's very, very significant. If he was in a group that weaned at 600, he was the bottom of the group, then he's not a decent growth animal. And so sometimes when you just look at, if you say, well, he weaned at 550 pounds, but he still has a negative, or he weaned at 650 pounds, but he still has a negative weaning weight EPD, you're not getting the whole picture when you just look at the performance record, because you're not looking at all of the other information going on with it. The EPDs, so I'm a geneticist, so I have to say this, but the EPDs are always, they're the summary of all of the information you have on that animal, and they always will be the best prediction of what that animal actually is.
Hey, I'm probably this spring or next year start doing testing just for parental use. I've never done any of this. What should I expect? Do you have these additional tests you need to ask for, or does this come with the genetic identification? What's this going to cost? I know it's not very expensive for identifying the parents, but what does it cost to get started on this program?
So the question is, what are the tests and what are the costs?
Are these additional tests? Is this something that comes with it whenever you pull hair, or what?
Yeah, this is actually a really good question.
Because I don't know anything.
Really?
That's why I've come up with good questions.
Really, there are two different tests you can, if you want to just make it boil it down to being really simple, there's two different tests. You can do parent verification, which is just saying who's the true sire. When you do that, all of this stuff I'm talking about doesn't apply. It's completely different.
So this is an additional test that you...
This is an additional test. So when we do this, we're looking at either 30,000 different places across the genome or 150,000 different places across the genome. When we do the parentage test, we're looking at 96 to 100. And so it's far above what a parentage test would do. But because of that, the price is also higher. Now I'm not gonna quote the price because I don't know what the association is charging, but I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah, the HD, these include parentage. This is with both of the labs that we're working with. The HD chips, that's $85, which includes parentage, and it's $60 on the LDs, which include parentage.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, sir.
85 and 60.
So there's a high density one, it's $85, includes parentage. There's a low density one, it's $60, it includes parentage. And then you have a parentage.
And then parentage alone is 35 on parentage.
and parentage alone is $35. So parentage, $35 you get 100 SNPs, $60 you get 30,000, $85 you get 150,000.
Okay, so for the extra $50, what would I expect to receive in benefit information out of that?
It'd be this right here. So let's say you have a yearling bull, okay, and he's at 20% accuracy, or let's just say 15% accuracy, and I say I can spend the extra. I need to figure out who the sire is. I want to verify, but I can spend the extra $50 to get up to the HD panel. Well, you can expect a jump from 15% accuracy up to about 40% accuracy on his EPDs. So you're going to be that much more sure about what that animal actually is. So that's the best way to look at it, is what's going to be the improvement in my accuracies, and then indirectly how much more sure am I going to be about that prediction. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think there's a question over here. Pass it over. Sorry. Oh,
So to say, what's the predictability of our EPDs in the Beefmaster breed?
The predictability of EPDs and what was that?
In the Beefmaster breed?
So that'd be this right here. I haven't actually looked at a sire summary to see where your accuracies are sitting.
The same thing is that you see very high EPDs and doesn't correlate with the animal and vice versa. So the thing is the predictability. We put a lot of weight on the EPD. We are predictors. In a way, the best predictor we have. What's the the analysis of that predictability to confirm that it's predictable?
Okay. Yeah, so the question is, what's the predictability of the EPDs?
The predictability of the EPDs.
And it's a little bit different than accuracies. I'm not sure what it is. I would expect that you would see it to be, find it to be right about in this area. If you have a yearling animal that's has a moderate, amount of data collected in its pedigree, and you look at his EPD and then you look at his actual performance data, you're going to have about a 20 to 25% correlation between those two. It doesn't mean you get every single one right. It means that on average you're going to get them right. And the tough thing is that the correlation isn't 1. It's not 90%. You're not absolutely sure. There's always some wiggle room there as far as
Below 50%.
it'd be below 50%. But you can make a lot of genetic progress being below 50%. You can still make improvement. All right.
The correct answer is, it's really, really hard for a cow to stack up as near as many progeny as a sire. So as the foundation of legacy animals, we went after the sires simply because that's the largest genetic footprint. Having said that, we're at this point now, we would love to have genotype, on all animals. So, the gates are open. The first 400, we wanted as many foundation animals to build the accuracy of the genotypes. We've got that, so now we'll take any animals moving forward. Yes. Yes. We could, but like I said, there's so few, it's hard for a cow to stack up as many progeny as the sire, so the fastest way there is starting with the sire. That's what we did. We would take all of them, and obviously some cows, I would strongly suggest if you've got a donor cow and she's still alive, I would strongly suggest, there is a perception out there that because we were asking for legacy animals first, we didn't want them. No, that's incorrect. We'll take every genotype we can.
And actually brings up a good point. Every genotype you collect helps you to predict that animal's EPDs, but it's also helping to strengthen everybody else's. And so that's the constant battle back and forth between doing this for the good of everybody else and improving this. Any other questions?
I was interested, you said that it's not flowing through to the subsequent generations at this point. I assume that would be the end game, right? To increase the accuracy for their offspring, for the younger animals, clone genotype, sires and males.
It will be. That will be the end game. The problem becomes, it's a process problem. The EPDs actually will flow through. You know, if a bull, his EPDs jump after you take send in a DNA test on him, his progeny's EPDs will also jump. The problem just becomes actually calculating those accuracies down to the progeny. That's the tough thing.
Can you repeat that?
The database strength, I mean, that's the whole ticket. We did the young bulls accuracy up, the numbers are more meaningful, and from a buyer standpoint, the system's much more valuable. I assume all of this is to get us to that point where those accuracies globally transfer across the entire gene pool certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to repeat the question was if you was about the progeny's EPDs or accuracies not increasing due to their sires having an EPD test or a genomic test. Right? Any other questions? All right, well, I'll be around for a little while.
I would tell you that as breeders, I'd like to echo something that John said. We are moving, on a relative basis, we're moving really, really fast. If you stop and look at the fact that the Beef Foundation, their ultimate goal for several years has been to get genomic enhanced EPDs. That has been a long, slow process. Beef has funded that. They've worked really, really hard. And on a relative basis, basically since June until now, we've pushed through we're pushing 500 genotypes at this very moment. And another breed that I'm very familiar with, they work for 5 years. They have more registries, they have more animals than we do. They work for 5 years and they just outcracked 1,000. So on a relative basis, we appreciate the fact that you as breeders are endorsing this, you're participating, and in the beef industry marketplace, there is one universal language out there. We're all competing for market share, but the one language that our commercial bull buyers all speak is called EPDs. And I get very excited about the progress that we're making on this. We're building selection tools that will make your cattle so much more competitive in that commercial market. We're at an exciting time, and I'd like to thank Beef for giving us the push to get started.
Can I correct something?
Yes, sir.
Beef is a repository. These are the folks that are making it happen.
Absolutely. And
And I applaud them.
absolutely. Give yourselves a hand, okay? Go ahead. We've got a great set of cell cow up there.